For this morning's non gameplay piece, I would like to talk a little about Marvel Snap's biggest bad. No, I'm not talking about Thanos, though you can see a sweet deck highlight with him on the channel today. I'm not even talking about Galactus. I'm talking about this guy, Leader, a card that if you've been engaging in any Marvel Snap content for the last week, you've probably heard a lot about. This 6 energy, 4 power card reads on reveal, copy all cards your opponent played this turn but on your side. What Leader ends up doing in a lot of games is if you are slightly ahead or even just behind enough. If you're behind by less than 4 in any given path and your opponent's playing out just a couple of things, you can play Leader, copy exactly what they do, and keep your advantageous position by matching them 1-to-1 on the board with whatever they played out. I think you definitely make the argument that Leader on its own is not too powerful. It's a card that requires you to be close to parity or ahead on board to really leverage its effect. And there are some tools in the game that allow you to even break that parity on the final turn if you're playing things that are synergy based. That being said, cards don't exist in a vacuum, and Leader, in combination with a lot of the other very powerful interactive cards in Marvel Snap, such as Kazar, Enchantress, and Shang-Chi, and most notably recently Leech, which was added to the game, has really felt like a difficult mixture for a lot of decks to overcome. And more importantly, I think it creates this kind of polarized gameplay experience that removes the fun for a lot of players, myself included. One of the things that I think makes Leader most frustrating to play against is that there's basically no cost to include it. While there's a lot of powerful 6 energy plays in Marvel Snap, usually their strength is being leaned on by the synergy they have with other cards in your deck. This means when you're playing against someone, they can typically read what cards are in the range your deck could have to realistically play around things that you could be playing as your top end bomb. Leader's just a generically powerful card though, and there's no regions or colors or classes in Marvel Snap to limit that, meaning Leader's being shoved as the top end into almost every deck for players that want to have this easy I win button on turn 6 when they're a little bit ahead on board. The gameplay patterns that this lack of synergy in Leader as a 6 drop creates is a dynamic that's very common in other card games, but really hasn't been in Snap up until this point, which is making your opponent have it. In Marvel Snap, your opponent is 75% to have their given synergy payoff in their deck on the final turn, meaning if you're very unlikely to beat their synergy payoff, it's correct to retreat and mitigate your losses. However, because Leader could just be in anything, you're often just forced to make what would be a bad call if you could have any kind of read on what they're playing and you lose to Leader versus not. It also leads to a lot of annoying situations where you're like, oh, Leader's in everything. I can play around Leader here, but then I lose to their other synergy bomb. And you go back and forth, and it really feels like it has removed this element of Marvel Snap that I found incredibly skill testing, which was realizing what your opponent could be playing and then playing around the things that you can or mitigating your losses when you can't. Whenever Leader comes up on stream, and I've articulated bits of this argument I just presented here at the start of this video, people always ask the question, well, Jeff, how would you fix Leader? So the rest of this video is 7 different ways that I think you could address some of the problem Leader has, and these are by no means all-encompassing. The card designers that work at Second Dinner are very smart, and I'm sure they'd have some wonderful ideas of their own, but here are mine. Let's get into it, starting with the easiest and simplest and probably laziest one, and that's get rid of his power. Just make him a 0 power card so you can't just be close on board. You have to be ahead on board to break that end game your way. You can't use Leader's 4 stats to catch up in a lane where you're currently behind. This next suggestion isn't a strict nerf so much as it is a side grade. I would like to see them magic Leader perhaps, and by that I mean let's make Leader cost 5 and cut its power down to 2 or 3 or maybe even leave it at 4, but make it so Leader can't be played on the 6th and final turn of the game. This would make it so Leader still has this powerful effect where you copy your opponent's big plays on an end game turn, but it's never the game decider. It gives your opponent information to make decisions with on whether or not they want to mitigate their losses or if they can try and overcome the swing that Leader has created. The rest of my suggestions for how they could change Leader don't involve changing his energy cost or power added, but simply change how his on reveal effect works. The first of these is I'd like to see the cards that Leader creates simply be abilityless. This could even make him a cool synergy card with Patriot. It would mean that cards with on reveal or ongoing style of effects or other rules text could still break the parity that Leader is creating on the final turn. Another, I think, excellent change to Leader is they could make it so he only copies the first card played into each lane for the turn. This means Leader would still be good against powerful opposing 6-drops with big stat lines, but it would be worse into decks that sequence out multiple things on the final turn of the game. A high variance option they could do for Leader is he could have the cards be created exactly as your opponent plays them, but played randomly on your side of the board. This means it would be difficult for you to set up a deterministic board position for Leader to win you the game from, while still allowing him to create lots of power like he does now. One suggestion I've heard thrown around a lot that I think would be a pretty substantial nerf to this card, to the point where they would probably want to add stats to him if they did this, is that Leader could only copy cards at the single location that he's played out at. This is obviously a much weaker effect, though, and I don't know if I love this one overall, but I wanted to mention it because it's a common one I hear brought up in the community. My favorite idea for how to adjust Leader is one that I think would add an incredible amount of dynamic play to the endgame decisions, where players would try and outthink and level each other. And that's, I think Leader should probably only copy your opponent's cards at the 2 locations he isn't played at. This means you would need to be playing for all 3 paths realistically for Leader to win you the game deterministically on the end turn, and there would be guesswork on both players' sides trying to figure out where players are going to play things in an ideal world, and then based on the levels of, well, how does Leader factor into this whole mess, that I think would really highlight the strength of the gameplay Marvel Snap has to offer typically. I know I just said a second ago that it was my last suggestion, but there is one other, and that's just delete him. They probably won't do that, but I probably wouldn't shed any tears if they did. At any rate, I would love to know how you would like to see Leader change. Do you think it needs a change? Do you think it's fine? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed my ramblings, as always, I'd encourage you to tap that like button. If you're new to the channel and made it all the way to the end of the video, consider coming back again. I post Marvel Snap tidbits like this, as well as game news updates and deck highlights here 7 days a week, and I'd love to see you back again. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, folks, and hopefully we'll see you some more tomorrow.